Thank you. Good morning. Excuse me. So, as mentioned, it's called the Extroverted Organization. And the question that I looked at was how and to what extent effective management of communications and relationships help achieve business goals and manage reputation. I also looked at how are we and how could we best use practices that have been identified in research over the last several decades in public relations within our program. And the reason that I wanted to look at this question is because of my own work as a Vice President of Corporate Relations and Communications at Ontario Power Generation. So we're a government-owned utility with about 10,000 employees, and we operate hydro, thermal, as well as nuclear facilities across Ontario. We've got over 70 sites. So for me, really what I was looking at here, our organization was going through a reorg, and we were bringing all of the relationships, communication type people together into one organization. And I wanted to look at, is there a way that I could take the research and develop a system for managing my department that would help us to not only align our own employees, which obviously is very important given our types of facilities, very important for us in terms of ensuring behaviors like safety and understanding initiatives and how to carry them out is done. But also we've got lots of issue management to deal with, as well as it's very important for us to have a good social license because of the number of communities that we have and obviously the kind of technologies that we work with. So in respect to what I looked at, I wanted to take a look at both the foundational elements. So how do you use the principles that have long been considered through things like the Excellence Study, for example, and the Grunigs of the world, in terms of using principles like two-way symmetrical communication. I've coined this an extroverted organization, taking the definition of extroverted to really mean caring about and working with the external environment around you and bringing that back into the organization. And that's really where that term comes from. In addition, I wanted to look at other foundational pieces that were recognized in public relations research, including the integration of public relations and the senior communicator within the organization. So how are you integrating into the organization to be most effective and to then ensure that we're managing the reputation as well as achieving the business goals. And then the third piece really that I looked at in terms of foundational pieces was the integration of ethic principles, not only in the function itself, but within the company. The second question that I looked at was, I had done some previous research leading up to this particular project and had really identified into 5 focus areas that the PR research seemed to suggest added value to organizational goals and reputation. And then the third piece was I wanted to look and say, having developed this model, is this something that I can integrate into my company in an effective way to manage our program? And in addition to that, how do others feel? How do other senior executives in the non-communications as well as senior communicators, how do they feel about this model and whether they felt it could work? So I also took a mixed method approach to this. Building on an extensive literature review, I did an ethnography, which is a little bit more rare type of research, which is really that first person in the field type of research that looks at the development, and in my case, the development of the model and the implementation of the model into my organization. As well, I did 8 in-depth interviews with senior communicators as well as non-communicators, an online survey, as well as some secondary research. I had already done 5 executive non-communicator interviews, and I had also done a survey of 10 CAOs based on the same theories. So really here, this is where the extroverted approach comes from. So if you go back to those foundational pieces, and I'm really just going to focus primarily on this one because of our time today, this is really taking the Grunig-Hunt definition, the Broom Center Cutlip, and the CPRS definition, and looking at that and saying, first of all, how do I envelope that into the model, as well in regards to my own program at OPG. And in addition to that, our practitioners using this out in the field, are companies and organizations using this out in the field, and are they finding it successful? And ultimately coming to the idea that, can citizenship and mutuality be good for business? So this is the 5 focus areas that I looked at. Scanning the environment, which is really that early going out into being an extroverted organization, if you will, early in the process of business planning, and bringing that information back on a regular continuous basis to feed into not just communication planning, but the business plans themselves. And having the function within the organization responsible for that, take that back into the organization. The second piece is, once we've done that, once we've gone out, we've had those conversations, we've scanned the pulse of the stakeholders, the communities, the publics, are we then feeding that in? And this is really where the integration comes into the organization. Are we feeding that into the organization in a way that allows us to align and engage employees in the business plan? And then how do we communicate that down through the organization and across the organization and back up and so on? Also using a two-way symmetrical model so that you have a workforce that are all stroking the same way and understand the vision and the values of the company and where you're trying to go, in addition to understanding their own work and how they fit into the success of the organization. The third part of it was really the creating the organization's voice and brand. And this is something that I found in the research people are actually pretty comfortable with. This is the, creating the narratives, the speech writing, all of the things that people think of when they think of public relations. The fourth piece is that relationship management, developing and managing those two-way symmetrical mutual relationships, whether that's through citizenship, whether it's through, in some cases, negotiation, having those discussions with public's consultation, engagement. And then finally, the research and measurement. And if you think of this on a daisy wheel, and in the middle is the dominant coalition, so you've got your executive team as well as your corporate relations or public relations communications function, really all of those things should be working together. So in terms of findings, with respect to the foundational principles, I found that in both the interviews and the quantitative research, there was a strong affinity, whether people knew who Hoornweg was or not. They certainly have understood and started to inculcate the idea of a two-way symmetrical model. And the concept is well spoken to, and people have a comfort with it and think it's the right thing to do. The one thing that I found in some of the quantitative in particular is what that looks like in practice may vary. People may think they have, and I think it may be worth some further research actually, in terms of, we get what two-way communication is, symmetrical communication, but is that actually what we're practicing? The second piece was that there was a familiarity and consensus, as well as a lot of use around some, although not all, of the foundational aspects. So about half of non-communication executives identified a strategic role for public relations as the literature would suggest is best practice. And they also recognized the importance of ethics, unprompted. That's 51% unprompted. In addition to that, most of them, when prompted, were able to get there. But the question remained, what is strategic? So there's a different idea, depending on who you're talking to, on what strategic communication is. And in terms of ethics, although everybody understood the concept that it was important to push that through the organization in terms of protecting reputation, again, a lot of people couldn't point to a code of conduct or some kind of system within their organization that ensured that they did that. The third piece was the majority of the organization do have a senior communicator at or on or adjacent to the management team. So there does seem to be that connection in between those groups and that high-level integration. With respect to the areas of focus, so everybody agreed that those 5 focus areas, there was very high majority on the fact that those 5 focus areas covered off a lot of the areas or all of the areas where public relations and communications can add value to the organization. Where things differed a little bit was in terms of people's comfort level. So people are very comfortable with that narrative building, getting the message out, whether it's through social media or advertising, et cetera. Where they're less comfortable is in that actual social media component of that. So there's still a lot of question for people about how to most effectively use social media in engaging publics. The other piece that was very strong, people felt very comfortable about relationship management. But again, when you go down a little bit further, how people are using relationship management, not everybody is comfortable giving the bad news. Everybody gets the idea you need to get the good news out very quickly. And then measurement. Communicators still don't like to do math, and we're still having a little bit of trouble getting the measurement done. So that was an area a lot of people identified as a weakness. The one thing people seemed to really like the idea of was having a model, having a system that they could look to say, how do I integrate this into my organization so that I can use it for developing a system that I can then measure, am I doing the right things? In OPG, this is what my department looks like. We have set up centers of expertise for things like media and issues management, government stakeholder relations, etc. We also have field staff who do a lot of the same things out in the field, in the communities directly, and they work together to support each other. And in the middle of that, we work directly with and integrate with the business units and the senior leadership team, myself being the adjacent to the senior leadership team in something called the corporate office, and I report to the president. As we were going through this, as I was developing this research, we were also going through that reorganization. And the whole idea of this was to move to a center-led matrix. So we have the direct integration between center-led functions like communications and the business units. So the expectation is that we are working together and that we're bringing the expertise and essentially doing two things well at once. So we're doing the communications well, and at the same time the engineers are doing the engineering well. And I actually have coined this engineers are from Mars, communicators are from Venus. And I try to, in my own organization and in speaking to this research, I've really tried to help my team to understand that, and to get the engineers to understand that when we're going to be most successful is when we're bringing those two things together and doing those two things well at the same time. And that is supported actually by the center-led matrix model that we have. So a couple of the ways I applied the 5 focus areas and the foundational aspects. For each area, I put, you can see on the left-hand side there, or yeah, your left-hand side, each of the 5 focus areas I identified what the activities and accountabilities within our group that we need to undertake to achieve that. And then I put owners to it so that, going to the point that it's easiest to measure what you write down, and then you have something to measure against and determine, are we doing this? And then on the other side here, on the right-hand side, I put down the area of study, what the literature says we should be doing, and then how well are we doing it? So is this a strength? Is this an area that still needs some improvement that we're progressing on? Or is it a weak area? And then that's a conversation that we have on an ongoing basis as we're updating our communication plans and our business plans to look and see where do we need to evolve our program further. So in terms of conclusions, the Gruening-Hunt two-way symmetrical as a normative approach is recognized as a good approach, and most people do seem to get that. Having said that, one size doesn't fit all. Even Gruening said sometimes people don't want to do that with you, and then there are some other things that you have to do to address issues that you have to manage. Leadership and integration point, again, direct relationship with the dominant coalition is recognized in the literature and is actually happening in the field. Ethics, the senior communicator needs to create guidance for the PR communication program and lead there, and also needs to be an input into the organization's overall moral compass, although there are often other people in the organization that have to have that responsibility as well. And then the 5 focus areas, so engineers are from Mars, communicators are from Venus. We work best when we work together. Building on best practices, and then again, the vast majority validated that a model, a system for implementing that, and particularly the areas that the research seemed to point to was the right model to go on. And then this last slide is just an illustration really of that idea of the Venus and Mars approach, and that simply is that you can't wait till you're at the top to start having those conversations with your publics. You need to be having the feeding in at the bottom when you're doing the evidence-based research as engineers or as doctors or as policy setters, administration. You need to be bringing that external scan into the equation. And if you think of the Keystone Pipeline as an example of this, where it might have been really good to have some more environmental scanning of where the issues might have been with the stakeholders and the publics early on, that might have been a very helpful thing. And the sweet spot really is in the middle. It's taking the math, taking what you want to do in terms of your initiatives and saying, do these match our values as a company? Does this match the expectations of our external environment, whether it's our communities, stakeholders, or publics? And with that, I think just questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you, very interesting research. So actually our time frame is really tight this morning. Could I just encourage people to speak
Absolutely.
to the session?
Sure.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure